Greetings, Taku Faithful. Thank you for joining me again this week. Once again, it's Larry Williams, OAW Commander-in-Chief, and I'm here to bring you all my full season review of Sons of Anarchy Season 6 right here on Otaku Assemble Weekly. And as promised, I'm finally here to bring you all my thoughts, my views, my opinions on the previous season of Sons of Anarchy. Now, we have a lot of material to cover. A lot of things to talk about. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to jump right into the review. Now, for the sake of some type of continuity, some type of coherent thought with this review, I've decided to break up this discussion into three key issues that I felt that the show did really well at addressing and integrating all these elements into the story. So the three main things that I'm going to talk about, gonna umbrella, if you will, is the legal elements, the criminal elements, and finally the family elements of season 6. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to talk about various topics within those three umbrellas, beneath those three umbrellas, and that'll pretty much make up the review. So let's start things off. Let's talk about the legal elements, since those are the things that have been set in motion that kind of kicked everything off for the season. Now, the first things first. Let's see, Tara's case. That was the first major element, because that was set up in season 5. We already got characters introduced to play a key role in that storyline, what with former Marshal Lee Torg being introduced and whatnot. And then, of course, you know, season 5 ended with Tara's arrest. So that's the first big thing I'm gonna talk about is Tara's case. Now, as I mentioned before, that was the case that got Lee Torg involved, and that was also the case that tried to piggyback off of Clay's setup in season 5 also, because Lee Torg from Jump Street was the character. He was the great avenger. He was the guy who came in, you know, his sister was murdered, and he was in for blood. He was in for revenge. He wasn't in for for justice, or it was because it was the right thing to do. You know, he stated several times in the series, he's in the business of hurting people who hurt other people. So that was his whole main crux of being introduced into the series. And once again, piggybacking off of the whole Clay thing, which we kind of knew this was going to happen. You know, he tried to use, well, first, let's see. First, he decided to go ahead and punish Otto. For Otto's, killing his sister. And then, of course, when Tara was arrested, he tried to go ahead and use her to try to get more information about the club so that he could use against the club as a whole. And, of course, when both of those things fell through, when Otto clearly wasn't going to give in to him, when Tara, of course, wasn't going to give in to him, then, of course, he went for Clay. And then Clay, you know, used his little power play, get what he needed, you know, the visitation with Gemma, the visitation with Jax, you know, the visitation with Otto, all those type of things he tried to maneuver against Lee Torg to do as well. So Torg was, you know, using these three vehicles to try and, you know, build up ammunition to use against the Sons, and they never went his way. At that point, he decided to take matters into his own hands. He killed one of the Diosa girls in order to frame Nero. Tried to set up Nero so that Nero would give up the club, and while that for a moment that was going to work, that ended up falling through as well. So finally, everything came to a head, and this was a very unexpected moment when him and Otto finally had their last meeting, and Otto killed him. Simple and put, Otto killed him, and then Otto got taken out by the security guards. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to talk about that in a little bit more detail right now, because as I mentioned, that scene, okay, that conflict reaching that conclusion, I wasn't surprised by, and I actually thought it was befitting that it would have ended with Otto and Torg, seeing as how those were the two main guys, those were the two main figures in that conflict. Otto was the one who killed Torg's sister, and Torg was the one who, you know, punished Otto after it happened. And so, yeah, the fact that it ended in that manner, the fact that it was as bloody and brutal and gruesome as it did, I thought was befitting. But as I said, very early, very early. I mean, I think, what was that? That was, what, 4 or 5? I don't even think we were halfway into the season when that happened. And yeah, I didn't expect it because I thought Torque was a character that was going to stick around until the conclusion. Because once again, you all will remember in my previous reviews when I've talked about Sons of Anarchy, when I've gone and used, tried to compare it to the source material and other literary references. Sons of Anarchy is inspired by Hamlet. It's a very radical, modern, gangster sort of interpretation of it, but it is inspired by Hamlet, and some of the plot elements in Hamlet are, referenced or at least used in Sons of Anarchy. So Lee Torek, a character whose name bears a reference to one of the main characters in Hamlet, Laertes, I thought this was going to be the guy who was going to stick around to the end, who was going to have this major confrontation with Jax, and I thought that's when he was going to get his curtain call. Apparently, that's not what happened. So it was one of the unexpected deaths. I think the first major unexpected death of the season, and there's 2 more that you all know of by now, and I'll get into more detail in those things later on. But keep in mind what I said earlier. Early, much sooner than expected. You'll hear me mention that numerous times throughout this review. Alright, so let's talk about some more things that happen under, the legal elements of this season. So I just went into detail about Lee Torek, about his involvement in the series, how he got involved during Tara's case. So with that being said, now I'm going to talk about the new case that we got in this season, which actually opened up the season at the end of the premiere. That was the school shooting that happened. Now, you guys will remember from the episode 1 and the episode 2 reviews for season 6 that I mentioned how that was a story element that I didn't expect at all. I didn't think that Kurt Sutter and the writers would take us into this direction or would introduce this element into the story the way it did, especially since in the last 2 years, these mass shootings have been very, very relevant and very common, within America. 2012, 2013, we saw a lot of mass shootings. So the fact that they would bring that into the series, I thought that was a major shock. But you all will remember that I mentioned it made sense and it's believable. And the fact that we have a story that focused on a gang of gun runners, the fact that that it took 6 seasons before this issue was introduced into the story, I thought, in all honesty, was kind of long overdue. But this is a very real world scenario that the Sons would find themselves in. The idea that one of their weapons would fall into the hands of a kid and he would use that to retaliate against kids who were bullying him at his school. That is not outside the realm of possibility for the Sons. So I thought that was very well done, and how it was connected to the Sons having the kid the kid was the son of Nero's cousin's old lady, and how that tied back into Nero and how they were confronted with having to deal with that. And also that, which I remember in when I reviewed episode 2, I thought that was one of those little confrontations that, it was going to be written off and it was going to be over and done with. How surprised was I when I found out that they used that as the main vehicle to finally break Nero and Jax apart, to create an internal conflict between them that finally came to a head by the end of the season, where when Nero found out what Jax had done when he ordered Juice to kill Darmody, that was it. He had washed his hands, and I'll get into more detail about that when I talk about Nero, because that is part of the family element, and that's part of the internal conflict that happened with the characters throughout the season. But that was really well done, how they set that up, And then seeing what Nero had to do, and this is part of the legal element too. Earlier I mentioned that, when Nero was set up by Torrid, and then he was brought before Patterson, the DA, and then she was trying to pretty much trying to string arm him, trying to get him to rat, and instead he took the rep for it. He was like, no, I was the one who did it. I was the one who sold the gun to my cousin, and that's how the kid got it. This is all on me. The Sons had nothing to do with this. The fact that Nero was willing to take that hit, only to find out later on that Jax had actually betrayed him when he ordered the hit on Darmody. I mean, man, that had to come to a head. There was no way that was going to be remedied, because Jax knew he was in the wrong for what he did. Nero knew that Jax was in the wrong, and Nero found out the truth from Juice himself. But of course, that's going to bring up another conflict between Jax and Juice, which I'll get to later on in this review. Alright, so let's see. Other legal elements of the story. I will take this time to mention that I liked the character of the DA Patterson. I liked her. Very well acted, great performance, and I like how she was portrayed, because she was one of the few like authority figures in this entire series who really did operate through negotiation and through playing hardball. She wasn't the type to con her way and to double cross other people like what was your girl's name? The ATF agent. I can't remember her name, but she wasn't like her, because the ATF agent, she made back alley deals and she double crossed people all the time to benefit her. She wasn't like Unser, because Unser, rolled over and he did what he thought was best at the time. Let the Sons have their way. Keep peace going in Charming. And then he wasn't like Mayor Hal, who did somewhat of the same thing, wanted to pose the Sons, but the second it didn't work out to his benefit, he didn't mind compromising. And then she wasn't like Sheriff Roosevelt either, because Roosevelt was hard up on the Sons. He didn't let up on them, and the only time he gave them any breathing room was when he was like, okay, all right, Jax, I see what you're doing, or okay, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, well, you figure out how to do this. As long as it don't blow back on me, we won't have no problem. But if it crosses my desk, then I'll have to handle it. So she wasn't like Roosevelt either. She legitimately did negotiations. Offer deals to this person, offer deals to this person. And it wasn't all about getting her way, because we saw multiple times, she cut Nero loose when there was no reason to pursue that any further. When she saw that dead end happen, she was like, cut him loose. There's no point in keeping him. And then when she offered the deal to Tara refused and didn't try to go back. She told her straight up, nope, that deal's off the table. So yeah, she was a hard ass, and she didn't necessarily compromise as much, but it was all legitimate. You know what I mean? And I like that she stayed that type of character, that she stuck to her guns, that she didn't waver at the first sign of trouble, and I like that. And also, we saw how she reacted when she was double-crossed, when she was fighting, when she knew that Jax was setting her up and trying to play her. Yeah, she didn't just roll over and let that shit happen either. So, all in all, I thought she was a great addition to the cast. And I really did like the way how her and Roosevelt bounced off each other, because Roosevelt, funny enough, was more of the soft heart. When Patterson wanted to go ahead and do this and do that, and Roosevelt was like, whoa, that's a little extreme now, you're going off the deep end. She didn't give a fuck. She was like, no, this is how we're going to do it, this is what's going to happen, get the fucking job done, stop arguing with me. That all that stuff between her and Roosevelt, I thought was fucking fantastic. Hands down, fantastic. Alrighty. Whew. Excuse me a minute. Alrighty. So yeah. Alright, so I got to so for the most part, that pretty much sums up all the legal stuff I really want to talk about, because I can't really get into much more detail about the legal stuff without getting into more of the family-oriented elements of the series. So now I'm just going to go ahead, I'm going to segue into the criminal stuff. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I really want to get into, them family elements, all the things that were going on with Jax and with Gemma and with Tara and with Clay and all that jazz. But I do want to talk about the criminal stuff because this season, above any other, man, what they did with all the criminal elements, with all the criminal power plays, I think this season really hit it on the mark. And let me tell you guys what I'm talking about. So we know in the season, after all the backlash and after all the heat from everything I just mentioned earlier in this review, all the stuff that was going on legally, we knew finally Jax has had enough. He's pulling out the guns and he's making the moves. He's doing everything. He's getting out of there. Well, now we expected to have that type of backlash from that with Galen and with the IRA. We knew they didn't want the Sons to get out of that. What I didn't know, or at least what I don't feel was appropriately illustrated until this season, was the Sons' place within the framework, within the power struggle, the balance that existed in North California. And it wasn't until I think the third to last or the second to last episode of the season when Alvarez is having this conversation with Nero. Alvarez said it beautifully because he finally illustrated it, that the Sons, their business and what they were doing, their operation was it was the boat that held the mechanism together. They were in the center of the Northern California power struggle between the Chinese, between the mob, between the Niners, between the Mayans, and the Niners being an extension of Pope's operation, and then of course the IRA, the Sons serving as the IRA's emissaries stateside. The Sons were in the middle of all of that, and the second Jax pulled out, the whole fucking mechanism fell apart. And we saw that happen when Galen went ahead and made a hit against the Chinese, when some of the street mobs that were working for Nero, they started fighting each other, and then the Mayans went ahead and struck the Niners, and then it's like literally like the fabric of that criminal empire just started unraveling at the seams. And that's because the Sons were the thread that held all that shit together. That was the one thing about this entire fucking conflict with Jax pulling out that I didn't expect, because I didn't know that they were that important. And I thought that was just fantastic how the writers put all of that shit together. That was fucking phenomenal. And I will say this, it was another thing I didn't expect, and that at first I was worried about, but I'm actually glad that they decided to take it the route they went in. And this is what I mean. The fact that I thought that the big conflict, the big, dispute with the IRA would be that would be the final conflict of the series, because we know season 7 is going to be the final season. I thought that would have been our conflict in season 7. The Sons finally getting up from under the IRA and the war that would transpire. But now in hindsight, seeing as how that came to a head in season 6, and now, it's set up to where the gangs have kind of assembled on their own, independent of the Sons. Now they might actually team up against the Sons and just fucking annihilate them. Not even push them out, but just get rid of them altogether. See, now that intrigues me a little bit more, because now we can spend the final season with the war at home. With, as they always say, there's something amiss in Denmark. But the fact that now everything on the home front has has been fucking in disarray, and now they're reforming and they're retaliating against the Suns. I think that is a much more appropriate conflict for our final season. So yeah, so all of that I thought was just done fantastic, really great. I will say though, I'm surprised that we didn't see more of Romeo and the cartel. I'm surprised that they're, because I think Romeo is in one of the episodes, or he's mentioned in a few, but they don't have, the cartel doesn't have the presence that they had in season 5 and in season 4 anymore. So that was my only complaint about this whole thing going on, is that we didn't see more of them, that we didn't see the cartel get involved more. But then again, that's because Alvarez is acting as the cartel's middleman. You know, he's kind of like their representative, so that does make sense. But even Alvarez, we didn't get to see until the last 3 episodes. All right, so now let's see. We've reached, I think I'm closing on my 20-minute mark. Yeah, I actually just passed my 20-minute mark, so I gotta get ready to wrap this thing up. So now we've reached the third element of this review I want to talk about, and that is the family element. All the internal struggle that was going on with the Suns this season. For fuck's sake, there was so much going on. You know, we pretty much had, the club was in disarray at the beginning of the season. Bobby was gone. Tig was, still supposed to be handed over to Marks. Chibbs was filling in as VP. Juice, we knew, was still on the fucking wire. He was going back and forth about the thing with Clay. Clay was finally ousted. I mean, the club needed some help. And Jax, the whole fucking time, is trying to hang on to the fucking reins of this thing for dear life. Trying to keep the damn carriage on the road, And then all of the family elements and all of the pressures going on in this season, all of this shit just bottled up. I mean, going back to what I said about Nero, Nero, here he is bending over backwards, really trying to help Jax, really trying to work out his relationship with Gemma. But they can't keep it separate. As much as they tried to not mix business with personal, they couldn't. With Nero dating Gemma and being Jax's business partner, there was no way to separate the two. And then with all the legal shit coming in, and then with Gemma's shit with Tara and Nero getting caught into that, there was no fucking way. So yeah, you had Nero bending over backwards, setting up the deal in Stockton, setting up the deal with with Diosa and all that type of shit. Then the gun hit, and then after what Jax did to him, I don't blame Nero. Especially since him and Alvarez actually are kin. I don't blame Nero for finally stepping away from the Suns and be like, nah man, I'm just gonna kick it with my own people. I need to look out for them, because he has, they stated he's been disregarding, he's been forgetting his crew the entire time this shit's been going on. I don't blame Nero one bit pulling out the way he did. Now, I will say I was so happy that Bobby actually wasn't going nomad, and that he spent the first half of the season actually recruiting people for Sam Crow. I thought that was a very good move. That was a very good power play. And especially since we saw what happened with Sam Crow after the clubhouse blew up and when they got into all this shit, they needed that manpower. So that was really good. And now, I'm just gonna take these last couple of minutes to talk about Jax and Clay, Gemma and Tara. Jax and Clay, that thing finally came to a head once again. Much sooner than expected. I expected Clay to make it to the last episode before Jax popped him. That episode was tense as shit, because they had the whole thing with Clay's breakout and how they maneuvered that. But what caught me by surprise the most is how Jax maneuvered the whole thing with killing Clay, killing Galen, and then using Galen's number 2 and orchestrating the whole story about how Galen and Clay killed each other, and they caught him and killed him, and they're still trying to remedy this thing, and how Jax set all of that up. I mean, we know he's capable of doing it. He did it with fucking Tig and with Pope and with Clay. He did it at the end of last season. He did it in season 3 with the ATF and all that jazz. So we know Jax is good at setting that type of shit up. But yeah, that was a really And that's my 25-minute marker. So yeah, that was a really good episode. That was really well done. And yeah, and you know, I'm kind of sad to see Clay go, because he was such a good character and he was such a good villain. You know, such a good antagonist. But you know, I did like the fact that Jax was the one who did it, and the way it was done, how that one event simultaneously was supposed to be killing off Clay, killing off Galen, and cutting off the sons from the IRA in one swift blow. Bam! You know, as they said in The Godfather, today I settled all family business. So I like how all that was handled. And then we get into the Gemma Terra thing, because I know you guys have been waiting to hear my thoughts on this. And this is what I'm going to say on that. That was actually the one event I wasn't surprised by this season, because you all will remember from my season 4 reviews, I've been calling Terra's, her curtain call since season 4. And given what happened in season 4 and what happened in season 5, how at the end of season 5 with her arrest, how we opened up season 6 with her case and everything that was going on, her struggle with Jax, her falling out of love with him, her choosing her family over the club, her trying to get her boys from under Gemma, from out under Sam Crow, from out of Charming, her making those multiple deals with, her pretty much playing with the deal with Torek, her refusing and then trying to set up the deal with Patterson, she even went as far as staged a false pregnancy and miscarriage just to get a restraining order against Gemma. Her trying to set up the thing with her attorney, with setting up, with getting Wendy to be the legal guardian and divorcing Jackson, all that stuff. And the fact that her main opposition the entire season doing all of this was Gemma, and for fuck's sake, she got Gemma arrested. She got the restraining order against Gemma. She managed to turn Jax against Gemma. And then, so when Gemma finally found out about all of this, the fact that Gemma snapped the way she did in that finale when she saw Tara, and remember how they played it off too, that wasn't intentional, because neither one of them even expected to see each other at that house. But the fact that after everything I just told you guys, after everything I just reiterated, that our season would conclude with that unexpected meeting, with no supervision, with no one interfering, that they were finally alone in one place in a setting that, funny enough, Gemma actually set it up at the beginning of the episode, cleaning that kitchen. For that to end as brutally as it did, and for that to end as sudden as it did, that was the hens coming home to roost. And I wasn't surprised at it at all. And the gruesomeness of it too, I wasn't surprised by either. I actually agree with Kurt Sutter's comments of how he said he wanted Tara's death to be domestic and to have something related to do with the home and not the club. That Tara would die more so by the knife rather than the gun. I thought from a literary standpoint and an artistic standpoint, that was much more befitting. But for fuck's sake, that was a gruesome end. And I'm pretty sure this camera's about to cut off. So don't mean to end this review as abrupt as I am, but there was just so much shit to cover in this review. But all in all, that's pretty much my thoughts on the season as a whole. Damn good season. And I'm really looking forward to season 7, but I'm going to be sorry to see the show go, I'll tell you that, because I've been following this fucker since day one, since it premiered, and I'm definitely going to miss it when it's gone. They already took Tara from me. What else can they do to me? I mean, kill my baby Tara. Ain't that about a bitch? Alright, so with that being said, this has been Larry Williams, OAW Commander-in-Chief, signing off, and until next time, peace.